Okay, everybody, I am back. I am first going to test out my audio and then I will get right into the stream. I know that I had a comment in the comment saying that I was taking too much time on the beginning of the streams and then I should go right into the topic. So I'm going to work on that. But one thing I do have to say is I cannot give up on the audio test. That's something that is very important for me. Just so you guys know, you can't you can't you can't rely on the internet when it comes to good audio. You could mess up, make a huge mistake, go through and do an entire episode, and your audio is not working. So I've learned that it's best to go through and check the audio, make sure everything's up to par before you start it. I apologize for having to do that, but that's just the way it is. Other than that, though, I am going to go ahead and get into the topics. I tested the audio, everything is working well on Rumble, YouTube, Twitch, X, and D Live, as well as Kick. So we are up and running. Today, we are starting out with, or we're going further where I left off. So with conspiracy, that's what today's episode is going to be on. So let me go ahead and do my moment of silence, take a drink of coffee, and get started with the show. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Conspiracy here on the Wonderful World of Weirdness and Strange Stories. My two channels, one is on the Wonderful World of Weirdness, is on Rumble as well as on YouTube, and Strange Stories is on YouTube as well as on Minds.com. Now, if you want to watch this episode too, other than them having their own channels, you can find them on Twitch, but those do not have a recorded copy. The only time you can watch those is while they are being streamed. So that has to be watched live. Other than that, you can check us out on X. We do live stream on X as well. That would be in my account, Roger Hansen at ROGLOL1973. On Twitch, I'm known as Infamous1969. And you can also get the live stream on Kick with my account there, which is Roger_Hansen. And I believe that's the same as that's also the same on D Live as well. So those are the platforms that you can find our streams on. Now, with that being said, today I'm going to go further in where I was before. Last week I was talking about the rat lines and the Nazis, the conspiracy, how they may have escaped out of Nazi Germany. I'm not going to make any assumptions. That's the story. That's the way it is. You draw your own conclusions. Now, I want to focus again on another person who was involved in the JFK investigation concerning his assassination. That would be Allen Dulles. Now, he is probably one of the most interesting people when it comes to the topics that we've been getting into. He was on the Warren Commission, but he also has a shadowy background in a lot of that has to do with MK Ultra. Now, a lot of people hear MK Ultra and they think conspiracy theory and oh, it never happened, and that's not the case. So, with that being said, I'm going to start the reading, and I'm going to let you know that everything I am saying here is not conjecture. Okay, this is stuff that has been documented, that's well known. All you have to do is research. Go on Google it, find out for yourself. You know what I mean? It's better that you find out for yourself so that you know rather than me tell you. Even though I am telling you the story, you know. So with that being said, here we go. In the shadowy landscape of post-World War II geopolitics, the rise of intelligence agents as power brokers behind the scenes became a defining characteristic of modern history. Among these, the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, of the United States stood at the forefront of an ideological and scientific crusade to control not only information and politics, but also the human mind itself. Central to this movement was Allen Welsh Dulles, who served as the first civilian director of Central Intelligence and oversaw the agency during one of its most formative and secretive periods. Under Dulles, the CIA initiated Project MK-Ultra, a highly classified program aimed at developing techniques for mind control and behavioral modification. The program, along with other clandestine operations, reveals a deep and disturbing fascination with psychological manipulation, covert warfare, and the shaping of reality for both enemies and allies alike. Allen Dulles was a man deeply embedded in elite American power structures, educated at Princeton and a veteran of diplomatic and intelligence work. Dulles represented the archetype of the American Cold War strategist. He viewed the conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union not merely as a geopolitical struggle, but as a war for the soul of humanity. In this ideological battlefield, conventional military forces would not be sufficient. Psychological warfare, disinformation, sabotage, and manipulation by both foreign populations and domestic sentiment became essential tools of statecraft. It was under this mindset that Dulles became a primary architect of the CIA's most controversial programs. Project MK-Ultra was formally approved in 1953 at the height of Cold War paranoia. Though cloaked in secrecy, this project was designed with a singular goal: to discover ways of controlling human behavior through a variety of methods, including hypnosis, drug administration. Hold on. Project MK-Ultra was formally approved in 1953 at the height of the Cold War paranoia. Though cloaked in secrecy, the project was designed with a singular goal: to discover ways of controlling human behavior through a variety of methods, including hypnosis, drug administration, sensory deprivation, and psychological pressure. Its name would not become public knowledge until the mid-1970s, when congressional investigations began to peel back the layers of CIA abuses. The project's origins, however, lie in the belief that the Soviets, Chinese, and North Koreans had developed effective methods of brainwashing, and the United States could not afford to fall behind in this alleged psychological arms race. MKUltra's reach was vast, operating through dozens of front organizations, academic institutions, hospitals, and prisons. Many of the people subjected to the program's experiments had no idea they were part of a government research project. In one of the most infamous operations known as Operation Midnight Climax, unsuspected individuals were lured into safe houses in San Francisco and New York City by CIA-contracted prostitutes. Once inside, the targets were dosed with LSD and observed through one-way mirrors as agents documented their reactions. The idea was to see how individuals behaved under the influence of psychedelics without knowing they were being drugged, thereby determining the feasibility of using such substances in field operations or interrogations. Beyond drug experimentation, MKUltra also explored extreme forms of psychological and sensory deprivation. Subjects were kept in darkened rooms for days, exposed to repetitive audio stimuli, or subject to prolonged isolation to see how these conditions could affect memory, identity, and suggestibility. Some programs experimented with electroconvulsive therapy and combinations of barbiturates and stimulants to break down individuals for reprogramming. In several cases, these methods caused lasting psychological damage or death, yet the individuals responsible were shielded by layers of bureaucratic anonymity and secrecy. One of the most morally egregious aspects of MKUltra was its disregard for consent. Notable institutions like Harvard University and McGill University unknowingly played host to MKUltra-related experiments. At McGill, Dr. Ewen Cameron conducted so-called psychic driving techniques in which patients were drugged, stripped of their sense of time and identity, and bombarded with recorded messages aimed at implanting new thought patterns. Cameron believed he could erase pathological behaviors and replace them with healthier mental states, but his experiments frequently left patients in a permanent damaged psychological condition. These operations were conducted with CIA funding and coordination, illustrating the profound context to which medical ethics were ignored in the pursuit of psychological control. The pursuit of behavioral modification was not limited to individual subjects. Psychological manipulation became a critical component in broader CIA strategies during the Cold War. Propaganda or psychological operations were used to influence public opinion both at home and abroad. The CIA funded journalists, infiltrated newsrooms, and used front organizations to push narratives favorable to U.S. foreign policy while suppressing dissenting views. These efforts were part of a broader campaign known as Operation Mockingbird, which aimed to control the flow of information and thereby steer collective consciousness. The goal was not only to combat communist propaganda, but also to ensure the American public's unwavering support for U.S. policies, regardless of their ethical implications. Dulles' belief in the utility of psychological warfare extended to regime change operations. During his tenure, the CIA orchestrated coups in Iran and Guatemala, using disinformation, bribery, and social unrest to unseat elected governments. These operations often included psychological components, spreading fear, manipulating press coverage, and using covert radio broadcasts to demoralize or confuse populations. While the official justifications for these actions were rooted in containment of communism, the underlying strategy frequently emphasized mind games over bullets. In this context, the line between psychological warfare and psychological experimentation blurred. Knowledge gleaned from programs like MKUltra was often applied in field operations without clear ethical oversight. Techniques instead intended for national defense were turned against both foreign targets and American citizens. For instance, the development of so-called truth serums was intended to aid in interrogation, but such substances could also be used to manipulate confessions or influence decision-making. Similarly, knowledge of how to induce paranoia or psychosis could be weaponized to discredit political adversaries or foreign leaders. After Dulles was forced to resign in the wake of the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, the CIA's interest in psychological control did not vanish. Though MKUltra was officially terminated in the early 1970s, it had already spawned a host of sub-projects and successor programs that continued under different names and auspices. The revelations of the Church Committee in 1975 brought some public awareness to the abuses committed under MKUltra, but much of the documentation had already been destroyed under the orders of CIA Director Richard Helms. This act of bureaucratic sabotage ensured that many of the details surrounding the most extreme or illegal experiments would remain forever obscured. Critics of the program argued that MKUltra was less about national defense and more about a rogue agency conducting morally and scientifically dubious experiments with impunity. Others believed the program revealed a deep cynicism within the U.S. intelligence apparatus, a willingness to sacrifice individuals for the sake of hypothetical advantages in the psychological domain. Even within the intelligence community, MKUltra became a point of controversy, with some officers questioning the validity and usefulness of the program's findings. Yet for Dulles and his cohorts, the potential payoff in behavioral control seemed worth the risk. The legacy of MKUltra continues to reverberate today. Many of the themes explored in the program, covert manipulation, psychological disruption, control of perception, have found new life in the digital age. Governments and corporations now use advanced behavioral data to influence populations on a mass scale, echoing the psychological ambitions of the CIA in the 1950s and 60s. The ethical question raised by MKUltra remains relevant, especially as new technologies emerge that promise even greater precision in the manipulation of thought and behavior. In retrospect, the CIA's deep involvement in psychological experimentation and behavioral control reflects a historical moment in which fear, ambition, and ideology combined to produce one of the most controversial intelligence programs in American history. Under Allen Dulles, the agency blurred the boundaries between science and coercion, research and abuse, defense and domination. The pursuit of psychological control was not merely a reaction to Soviet threats, it was a part of a larger vision of warfare in which the human mind itself became the ultimate battleground. That legacy, with its dark implications and unresolved consequences, remains an indelible part of the history of American intelligence. The case of Ted Kaczynski, the infamous Unabomber, and his potential involvement in ethically dubious psychological experiments during his time at Harvard University, has drawn intense scrutiny over the years. Kaczynski, who waged a nearly 2-decade-long bombing campaign against individuals he claimed were advancing modern technology and industrial society. He claimed were advancing modern technology and uh, industrial society at the cost of human freedom, was eventually arrested in 1996. After his identity was revealed, an obscure detail from his past emerged. His participation in a psychological study while attending Harvard, which some investigators have suggested may have had ties to the CIA's controversial MK Ultra program. Kaczynski entered Harvard University in 1958 at the age of 16, an unusually young age for a college freshman. By the time he was 17, he had become involved in a study led by Harvard psychologist Dr. Henry A. Murray. Murray was a former OSS, which is Office of Strategic Services officer during World War II, and he had experience developing interrogation techniques for military and intelligence purposes. The project Kaczynski participated in was officially intended to analyze how individuals responded to stress and personal humiliation, ostensibly to understand the personality development and resilience under pressure. The actual implication of the study was far more intense than its academic language suggested. Kaczynski and other student volunteers were subjected to what many later described as psychological abuse. Participants were asked to write essays about their personal beliefs and philosophies, only to have those essays used against them in later sessions. During these sessions, they were subjected to hours of hostile interrogation in which their core values, intelligence, and identity were repeatedly attacked by professional interrogators, all while their reactions were filmed and analyzed. These sessions occurred weekly over a span of nearly 2 years, and while there is no direct evidence that Kaczynski's participation in the experiment directly caused his later violent actions, many psychologists and historians believe the experience could have contributed to his mental deterioration. The fact that Kaczynski was already socially isolated and extremely intellectual made him particularly vulnerable to the kind of psychological manipulation employed by Murray's studies. At the time of these experiments, the CIA's MK Ultra program was actively funding and conducting secret mind control experiments across the United States and Canada. MK Ultra was known for its use of LSD, sensory deprivation, hypnosis, and other forms of psychological manipulation. often performed on unwitting subjects. The program sought to discover methods for controlling human behavior, often with the goal of producing agents who could resist interrogation or who could be programmed to perform specific tasks. Although there is no definitive evidence proving that Murray's experiments was a direct part of MKUltra, there are a number of factors that suggest at least a thematic or philosophical overlap. First, Murray intelligence had established intelligence connections from his time in the OSS, which eventually became the CIA. Second, the methods he used mirrored those employed in MKUltra founded projects, particularly the emphasis on breaking down the subject's personality through humiliation, stress, and interrogation. Finally, the timing coincides with the peak years of MKUltra operations. One of the complicated factors in linking the Harvard experiment to MKUltra is the absence of declassified documents that specifically name Murray's study as a part of the program. MKUltra files were notoriously incomplete, with many destroyed in the 1970s after the program became the subject of Senate hearings and public outrage. Still, researchers argue that MKUltra operated through a network of front organizations and contractors, meaning that funding and oversight were often hidden under layers of bureaucracy and academic cover. For Ted Kaczynski, the Harvard experiment seems to have been a pivotal moment in his life. Although he never explicitly blamed the study for his later actions, letters he wrote from prison and notes in his journal indicate that he saw it as a deeply traumatic experience. In his mind, it represented the dehumanizing effects of modern science and the abuse of power by intellectual elites, ideas that became central to his later anti-technology manifesto. The legacy of the experiment has led to renewed calls for ethical oversight in psychological research. It also highlights the disturbing proximity of academic institutions to military and intelligence agendas during the Cold War. Harvard, like many universities at the time, participated in defense-funded research, and the line between academic inquiry and state-sponsored experimentation was often thin. Ultimately, whether or not the experiment was officially part of MKUltra may remain unknown, but the parallels are too striking to ignore. Both were secretive programs involving psychological manipulation. Both aimed to understand or influence human behavior under stress, and both left a trail of controversy and human suffering in their wake. Ted Kaczynski's descent into violence may have had many causes, but the role of psychological experimentation in shaping his worldviews is a disturbing chapter in the broader story of Cold War era mind control research. Now, after that, I am wanting to go deeper into it. We've just discussed Ted Kaczynski and Alan Dulles with MKUltra. Now, I am going to go from there to Um, what I'm going to do here first is I'm going to kind of go over DARPA. DARPA is probably the next best step to go here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start up on DARPA and some of the projects that DARPA was involved in. Now, Project MK Often was a lesser-known offshoot of the more famous MK Ultra, part of the CIA's broader attempts to explore unconventional and controversial psychological manipulation tactics during the Cold War. The project was primarily focused on the use of occult and paranormal phenomena for intelligence and military purposes, investigating various esoteric practices to see if they could be integrated into psychological operations and warfare. It is believed that MK Often was operational in the late 1960s and early 1970s with efforts to incorporate parapsychology, occult rituals, and mind control techniques from both scientific and metaphysical perspectives. The project was part of the larger MK Ultra initiative that sought to experiment with mind control, behavior manipulation, and other psychological techniques to gain a strategic edge over adversaries. However, unlike MK Ultra's focus on drugs, hypnosis, and sensory deprivation, MK Often was interested in phenomena that were outside the conventional scientific realm. Researchers in MK Often explored the potential use of occult rituals, psychic abilities, and other unproven methods to gather intelligence or influence foreign governments. This included investigating the use of tarot cards, astrology, clairvoyance, and remote viewing in the context of gathering military or strategic intelligence. Although the full scope of MK Often remains shrouded in secrecy, the project's efforts to integrate the paranormal into espionage operations are a notable reflection of the era's experimental and often controversial approaches to intelligence gathering. The CIA was interested in every conceivable method of gaining an advantage during the Cold War, and MK Often's investigation into the supernatural underscores the extremes to which the U.S. government was willing to go in its search for intelligence tools. Despite the project's failure to deliver any proven or reliable intelligence tools, it serves as a symbol of the Cold War era obsession with unconventional warfare techniques and the blurred line between science and superstition in intelligence operations. MK Search was another CIA program that operated within the broader MK Ultra framework, designed to study chemical and biological agents for use in warfare and intelligence operations. While MK Ultra focused on drugs, hypnosis, and psychological manipulation, MK Search aimed to develop new and more potent means of control using toxic substances, biological agents, and other chemical weapons. This program represented the intersection of psychological and physiological warfare as it sought to develop methods for incapacitating or controlling enemy forces in covert and highly effective ways. MK Search ran experiments on a range of substances, including various nerve agencies, psychochemicals, and incapacitating agents that could potentially be used for espionage, assassination, or covert operations. The project explored how chemical agents could be delivered to targets without detection, and how they could be used to manipulate or incapacitate individuals in a variety of covert missions. As with other MK Ultra programs, many of the tests were conducted on unwitting subjects, including civilians and military personnel, often with little regard for their safety or well-being. MK Search was part of the U.S. government's broader interest in chemical warfare and biological warfare during the Cold War. While chemical weapons were banned under various international treaties, these projects operated in a gray area, with the government exploring the potential military advantages of such agents despite the ethical and legal implications. The program's research contributed to the development of chemical agents used in later military operations, and served as a stark reminder of the darker side of the Cold War arms race, where the boundaries of ethics and legality were often tested in the pursuit of national security. After that, there's Total Information Awareness, which is TIA, and that was a controversial and ambitious surveillance program initiated by the U.S. government in the early 2000s, aimed at collecting vast amounts of data on individuals to detect potential threats to national security. The program was created by the Information Awareness Office, which was part of the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, DARPA, and it sought to analyze and process information from various sources, including financial records, communications, and travel data, to identify potential terrorist threats before they could materialize. The main goal of TIA was to build a comprehensive database that could be used to track individuals' activities and uncover patterns indicative of terrorist activity. This included the use of data mining techniques, which would scan large amounts of data for irregularities, and the application of predictive analytics to forecast potential threats. The program was designed to help authorities preemptively identify and neutralize security risks, making it a key part of the U.S. government's post-9/11 efforts to improve national security. However, TIA faced significant backlash due to its scope and the potential for violations of privacy and civil liberties. Critics argued that the program was a form of mass surveillance that could allow the government to monitor citizens without their knowledge or consent. Concerns were raised about the possibility of the government's overreaching in its pursuit of national security and whether the data collected could be misused or abused. As a result, TIA was eventually defunded by Congress in 2003, but its legacy continues to influence the way governments around the world use technology for surveillance and counter-terrorist operations. Next is the LifeLog project, which was initiated by DARPA in 2003, and it was an ambitious attempt to build a detailed database of individuals' lives through the collection of personal data. The project aimed to create a comprehensive digital record of a person's activity, thoughts, and interactions, capturing everything from daily routines to conversations, interactions with others, and even emotional states. This information would be gathered through the use of sensors, cameras, GPS devices, and other tracking technologies with the goal of building a vast interconnected web of personal data. While the LifeLog project was initially conceived as a way to help individuals organize their own lives and create a personal digital archive, it was soon viewed as a potential tool for surveillance and intelligence gathering. The idea was to track individuals in real time and use the data to analyze their behavior, identify trends, and predict future actions. This concept foreshadowed the development of modern social media platforms and the increasing use of data analytics to profile individuals based on their own online and offline activities. In 2004, the Lifelong Project was abruptly canceled, coinciding with the rise of Facebook, MySpace, and other social media platforms. Although the Lifelong Project was terminated, many of its ideas and technologies found their way into these commercial platforms, where they continue to be used to track and analyze user behavior. The LifeLog project represents an early example of how digital surveillance and data collection could be used not just for military or intelligence purposes, but also for social and economic manipulation in the digital age. Silent Talk was a covert program explored by various U.S. intelligence agencies, including the CIA, during the Cold War, which focused on researching remote communication techniques. This project sought to investigate the potential for transmitting thoughts or communications without the use of speech or external devices, a form of thought transmission that would provide intelligence operatives with the ability to communicate covertly without being detected by adversaries. This project was part of a larger series of experiments conducted by the U.S. government to explore unconventional methods of communication, manipulation, and control, including efforts to harness telepathy, nonverbal signals, and other psychic phenomena. The aim of Silent Talk was that to develop a form of silent communication that could be used in sensitive operations, enabling spies and intelligence officers to pass information to one another without making a sound or using any visible gestures. Although the project did not yield definitive results or usable technology, it reflects the broader fascination with the potential for advanced and untraceable communication techniques. The U.S. government's interest in this area was influenced by the growing field of parapsychology during the mid-20th century, where claims of psychic abilities like telepathy and clairvoyance were being investigated as possible military tools. Despite the lack of concrete success, Silent Talk represents an example of the CIA's willingness to experiment with the limits of science, technology, and the mind during the Cold War. The project remains an obscure and largely unacknowledged part of the broader pattern of unconventional and secretive government research into espionage, psychological warfare, and intelligence gathering. The program's existence was primarily kept under wraps, and much of what was pursued remained speculative, as declassified documents on the subject provide little tangible evidence of its outcome. However, it underscores the continual exploration of unconventional methods during this period, which set the stage for future advances in non-traditional military and intelligence techniques. Project Iceworm was a top-secret U.S. military project, primarily run by the Army Corps of Engineers in cooperation with the CIA, which aimed to build a network of underground missile bases beneath the ice sheets of Greenland during the Cold War. The primary goal of Iceworm was to create a network of nuclear missile sites capable of launching intercontinental ballistic missiles (ICBMs) directly into Soviet territory. The project's name was derived from the conditions under which it was to be carried out, deep within the ice sheets, using the natural features of the environment to house and protect missile silos. The secret nature of Iceworm was such that its existence was only revealed to the public many years later, following the Cold War. The project was conceived during the early 1960s as a countermeasure to Soviet nuclear capabilities, particularly to deter potential nuclear strikes on U.S. soil. The idea behind Project Iceworm was that the missile sites would be hidden beneath thick ice, making them impervious to Soviet detection and attack, and ensuring a robust deterrent capability. The project involved extensive engineering challenges, including the construction of tunnels deep beneath Greenland's ice sheet, a task that posed both significant logistical and technical hurdles. However, the project was abandoned in the 1970s after it became clear that the environment and technical difficulties of such an undertaking were unsurmountable. Iceworm was officially deemed a failure due to its high cost, the unstable nature of the ice, and the realization that the sites were not as secure as originally believed. Despite this, it was a major Cold War era initiative reflecting the increasing militarization of the Arctic and the strategic importance the U.S. placed on maintaining a powerful nuclear deterrent against the Soviet Union. Project Iceworm is an example of the Cold War. Is an example of the bold, sometimes reckless military ambitions of the Cold War era, when technology and secrecy were leveraged to achieve geopolitical objectives. The Insect Allies Program, initiated by DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, is an example of the U.S. government's experimentation with genetic engineering in the context of biological warfare and agricultural manipulation. The program, which began in the 2010s, was designed to explore the use of insects such as beetles, aphids, and whiteflies as vectors for genetic modification. The purpose of the program was to determine if these insects could be used to deliver genetically engineered viruses to crops, altering their DNA to confer resistance to disease, pests, or environmental stressors, or to make them more productive. Although the stated goal of the Insect Allies program was to improve food security by enhancing crop resilience, critics have raised concerns that such technologies could be weaponized for biological warfare. The ability to alter the genetic makeup of plants covertly via insect vectors would allow for the potential manipulation of food supplies or the spread of genetically engineered pathogens that could destroy crops, disrupt economies, or destabilize nations. DARPA's involvement in this project has been controversial, with detractors pointing to the program's potential military application and its secrecy as a cause for concern. The Insect Allies program raises significant ethical and practical questions about the intersection of biological research, agriculture, and national security. It highlights the blurred lines between peaceful scientific advancement and the potential for misuse in warfare. While the program's public focus remains on agricultural benefits, its dual-use potential, the ability to exploit this technology for military purposes, has prompted concern for international arms control organizations and experts in bioethics. Predictive behavior algorithms and social media monitoring represent the growing influence of data analytics in intelligence gathering and surveillance, a key area of interest for both government agencies and private companies. The use of algorithms to predict human behavior based on social media activity, online behavior, and public record is becoming increasingly prevalent. As more personal data is made available through digital channels, governments, intelligence agencies, and corporations are all interested in leveraging this data to anticipate potential threats, influence public opinion, and maintain control over individuals. Predictive behavior algorithms work by analyzing large data sets, often sourced from social media platforms, online transactions, and digital communications, and using machine learning techniques to forecast future actions or decisions. These algorithms can track patterns of individuals' behaviors, predict their future actions, and even identify potential risks or threats before they manifest. This can be used to prevent terrorism, reduce crime, or influence social movements, but it also raises significant concerns about privacy, civil liberties, and the potential for abuse. Social media monitoring, particularly when combined with predictive algorithms, represents a powerful tool for surveillance and control. Governments can use social media data to track individuals, monitor their political opinion, and identify potential subversive behavior. While such technologies may have legitimate uses in national security, they also raise questions about the erosion of personal freedoms, the overreach of surveillance, and the potential for totalitarian control. The line between protecting national security and infringing upon individual rights is becoming increasingly difficult to draw as these technologies evolve. Neural engineering is one of the cutting-edge fields being explored by DARPA, focused on the development of technologies that bridge the gap between the human brain and machines. This field has seen significant advancements, particularly in the area of controlling pro, pro, prosthetic no, particularly in the area of controlling prosthetic limbs and even directly interfacing with with the human brain to control technology. The goal is to create a brain computer interface, that's a BCI or BCIs, that can directly translate neural signals into commands for robotic limbs, offering a future for people with disabilities, especially those who have lost limbs, can regain full function and control over their movements. In the military context, DARPA has been particularly interested in developing neuroengineering technologies that can enhance soldiers' capabilities, both physically and mentally. For example, through neural interfaces, soldiers could potentially control robotic exoskeletons, drones, or other machines using just their thoughts, increasing their operational effectiveness and efficiency. Additionally, DARPA has also explored the idea of neuroengineering as a way to treat PTSD or other psychological conditions that affect soldiers, using technology to modify or regulate brain activity to improve mental health outcomes. On the other hand, this technology raises concerns about privacy, autonomy, and the potential for manipulation. As BCIs become more advanced, the possibility for unauthorized access to an individual's thoughts, memories, or emotions could become a reality. Furthermore, the use of neural engineering technologies for military purposes, such as enhancing soldiers' cognitive abilities or controlling their movement, may blur ethical lines and lead to unintentional consequences. The advancement of these technologies represent both the promise of improving human life and the danger of creating new forms of surveillance or control. The development of autonomous robots and weaponry is one of the most controversial and impactful areas of DARPA's research. One of the most well-known robotic projects funded by DARPA is Atlas, a humanoid robot designed to perform a wide range of tasks, including search and rescue, military operations, and hazardous material handling. Atlas, a product of DARPA's Robotic Challenge, is designed to operate in environments that are too dangerous for humans, such as disaster zones or combat situations. The development of autonomous robots like Atlas is part of a larger initiative by DARPA to create robotic systems that can function independently, making decisions in real time without the need for human oversight. While robots like Atlas are still primarily focused on non lethal missions, the increasing development of autonomous weaponry has raised significant ethical and strategic concerns. The idea of machine making life or death decisions on the battlefield without direct human control introduces the possibility of unintended escalation, mistakes, or misuse. In addition to robots like Atlas, DARPA has been funding projects that aim to develop autonomous drones, ground vehicles, and weapon systems. These technologies could potentially be used in combat scenarios where rapid decision-making capabilities of robots might be an advantage. However, the risks of autonomous weaponry have been highlighted by ethicists and human rights groups, who argue that machines should not have the ability to decide who lives or who dies in war. Autonomous weaponry could significantly change the nature of warfare, making it faster, more precise, and potentially less risky for soldiers. But it also introduces new challenges in terms of accountability, oversight, and control. If a robot makes a mistake or targets civilians, who is responsible for that action? As the development of autonomous robots and weaponry continues, these questions will be increasingly important for policymakers, military leaders, and international governing bodies. DARPA's involvement in satellite technologies and space surveillance has long been an essential aspect of U.S. national security strategy. The U.S. military relies heavily on space-based assets to monitor activities across the globe, track military movements, and communicate securely. DARPA's role in the development of space technology has been instrumental, particularly in the context of surveillance satellites, reconnaissance, and early warning systems. The Black Budget refers to the secretive and classified funding allocated for those projects, often involve highly advanced cutting-edge technology that is not disclosed to the public or Congress. Many of these satellite programs funded by DARPA under the Black Budget are designed to gather intelligence, monitor foreign missile launches, and provide strategic advantages in warfare. Some of these programs are so secret that they remain undisclosed for years or decades after their completion. The U.S. government has also used space-based systems to intercept communications, track the movements of adversaries, and monitor global environmental changes. As the world's reliance on space-based assets grows, the importance of DARPA's space program has become increasingly clear. Space surveillance systems have also been vital for ensuring the security of U.S. military operations. With the rise of space as a domain of warfare, ensuring that military satellites and assets are protected from potential adversaries has become top priority. DARPA's research into satellite technology has led to the development of advanced tracking systems that can detect enemy satellites, monitor for potential threats, and ensure that U.S. assets remain secure. As space becomes more crowded with satellites and other objects, the importance of maintaining situational awareness and the ability to defend against threats in orbit is crucial. DARPA's space surveillance programs plays a key role in ensuring that the U.S. maintains an edge in space-based military technology and intelligence gathering. They continue to develop technologies that could be used in future space warfare or strategic operations. Project MK Often was a covert DARPA-funded initiative that was reportedly aimed at exploring the psychological effects of drugs, mind control, and behavioral modification. While details surrounding the project remain scarce due to its classified nature, it is believed that MK Often was part of a broader set of experiments, many of which fell under the umbrella of the larger MK Ultra program. The purpose of MK Often was to investigate the potential for influencing human behavior and the human psyche through various means, including drugs, hypnosis, and other experimental technologies. The program, which spanned from the 1960s to the 1970s, followed in the footsteps of previous mind control experiments conducted by intelligence agencies such as the CIA. The goal was to study how certain substances, techniques, or methods could be used to alter human behavior, particularly in military purposes. In particular, the project sought to explore the possibility of using behavioral modification for both intelligence gathering and psychological warfare. The ultimate aim was to gain an advantage in the realm of human cognitive control and influence. One of the major concerns raised by MK Often and its association with MK Ultra was the ethical implications of the experiments. Many of the individuals who were subject to these tests were not informed of the risks involved and were often used without their consent. The idea of manipulating or controlling individuals in such a way raised alarms in both public and legal circles, especially as more information about MKUltra and related projects came to light. MKUltra and MK often highlight a disturbing aspect of DARPA's history: the willingness to explore and sometimes implement highly controversial and morally questionable techniques for the purpose of gaining strategic advantage. The question remains as to what extent these experiments were ethical and what lasting effects they may have had on the individuals involved. Today, these projects serve as a chilling reminder of the potential for misuse of science and technology in the pursuit of military or political goals. MK Search was a secretive program launched by DARPA that focused on the study of mind control and behavioral modification techniques as well, similar to the MKUltra project. The program was intended to assess the potential of using various methods such as hypnosis, drugs, and other forms of psychological manipulation to influence the control and behavior of individuals. The project was part of a larger initiative that sought to understand how psychological techniques could be utilized for military intelligence and operations. The MK Search program, which ran during the 1960s and the early 1970s, aimed to develop ways to control or alter the actions and decisions of individuals without their knowledge or consent. This involved experiments with mind-altering substances, sensory deprivation, and other methods to study the malleability of the human mind. In particular, the program explored how psychological techniques could be used to extract information from subjects, alter their memory or perception, or influence their actions under duress. As with MKUltra, the MK Search program raised serious ethical concerns, especially regarding the lack of informed consent from participants. The use of drugs, hypnosis, and other manipulation techniques in controlled settings raised questions about the boundaries of medical and psychological research. There were concerns about whether the subjects were being exploited for research purposes or whether they were being subjected to unnecessary harm. Today, MK Search is part of the broader legacy to convert government operations that sought to control and manipulate the human mind. No, MK Today, MKUltra is part of a broader legacy of covert government operations that sought to control and manipulate the human mind. These programs, which continued for decades, remain controversial due to their often unethical nature and the long-term effects they had on the subjects involved. The MK Search program was an early example of how the military and intelligence communities used scientific research in the pursuit of power, often at the expense of basic human rights. The Total Information Awareness (TIA) program, initiated by DARPA in 2002, was one of the most ambitious surveillance projects ever conceived by the U.S. government. Its primary goal was to develop a system capable of collecting, analyzing, and storing vast amounts of data from various sources, including public and private records, communications, financial transactions, and more. The idea behind TIA was to create a comprehensive system of surveillance that could identify potential threats to national security before they materialized. The TIA program aimed to merge disparate sources of data using advanced algorithms and data mining techniques to detect patterns and correlations that could indicate terrorist activities or other threats. The project's vision was to create a system that could predict and preemptively address national security concerns by analyzing massive amounts of information in real time. However, the TIA program faced intense criticism due to its potential for widespread surveillance and the invasion of personal privacy. Privacy advocates and civil liberties groups raised concern about the collection of sensitive information without oversight or regulation, arguing that such a system could lead to the erosion of fundamental freedoms. In response to these concerns, the TIA program was officially canceled by Congress in 2003, although elements of its technology and goals were integrated into other government programs. Despite its cancellation, the TIA program remains a point of contention in discussion about government surveillance and privacy. Technology developed during the program was seen as a precursor to the kind of mass data collection and analysis that would later become more prevalent in the age of big data and advanced analytics. It was a clear reflection of the growing influence of surveillance technologies in the post 9/11 era and the increasing tendency of governments to use technology in the name of national security. The LifeLog project developed by DARPA was an ambitious attempt to create a detailed and continuous record of an individual's life. The idea was to use advanced technology to capture everything a person did, thought, or experienced throughout their day. The project aimed to track personal information, including interactions with others, physical movement, and even internal thoughts and feelings, in order to create a comprehensive digital profile of each individual. Long, no, Lifelong was originally intended as a tool for personal development and enhanced decision making. By collecting vast amounts of personal data, the system would theoretically be able to help individuals make better choices based on their past behavior and experiences. The project was particularly focused on creating a digital memory for individuals, essentially recording and storing everything they experienced in a way that would allow for easy retrieval and analysis. However, concerns of privacy and potential for abuse quickly emerged. The idea of having every aspect of one's life recorded and analyzed by a machine raised significant ethical issues. Critics argued that the LifeLog project had the potential to create a dystopian future where personal freedoms were violated and individuals' every move and thought were monitored by the state. The program was officially canceled in 2004, but the ideas and technologies it sought to develop have been the subject of renewed interest in recent years as advances in personal data collection and tracking technologies continue to grow. So that was a pretty interesting part of what I wanted to bring up. It's a big read, and I think I may have repeated some of that. I'm not quite sure if I did, but it's okay because this had to go for an hour, and it was good to at least do it as a review. Um, Now, I wanted to go through DARPA, Ted Kaczynski, and I also wanted to cover Alan Dulles, which I just did. Um, but now I also want to go through two more programs, or three actually, that I want to work on. I'm going to come back. I'm going to go back over in more depth Operation Mockingbird. And then there was also Project Agile and Project Bluebird, which are two programs that were within DARPA that I really want to go over in more detail. All the ones that I just read were ones that were barely ever heard about, um, but they did exist. Some of them were really far out there. You can still hear a lot about it from people when they discuss this topic. A lot of them don't really know the actual naming of them, but they all know that it originally came out of ideas from MK Ultra. You know what I mean? So that is what I wanted to do today. I'll come back and I'll do those too. I've got more um, things that I want to cover as well, other than MK Ultra and Delos. So there's going to be more in store than just that, because this is a huge topic that I've been talking about. I want to start talking about Operation Paperclip, the Bikini Atoll. Also, I'm wanting to get into NUMIC and that U.S.-Israel nuclear agreement that they had going on too. That'll bring me into the topic of Karen Silkworth and Vanunu. Uh, Mordecai Vanunu, if nobody's heard of him, he's a very interesting character that has been real heavily overlooked when it comes to people talking about conspiracy. So I'm going to be bringing him up eventually too. So I've got a lot of stuff ready for this year's season of conspiracy. So stick around. If you like the uh, video, please like, subscribe, share, make comments. Feel free to make comments. Don't worry about it. Just don't be a dick about things. If you got feedback, just give some feedback. And I mean, if you have critical feedback, whatever, constructive criticisms, do that too. Just kind of be respectful. I always say, we all don't have to agree on everything. Just learn how to respect one another's points of view, things of that nature. And if you do make a comment, I will respond. That's one thing that I really love doing, is having conversations. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you have a good day, good morning, good evening, whichever time of the day it is for you. And with that, I am going to end the stream. Thanks for watching.